I had 24 real-life hours to tame every creature on Ark Survival Evolved, the island. From the dodo to the titanosaur, it was a race against the clock. But was it possible? Let's find out. If you did enjoy the video, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and also come and give me a follow on Twitch, where this challenge was streamed. I spawned in on the southwest part of the island, and immediately started the ticking time bomb that was the 24-hour timer. This thing was continually visible to me over the course of this challenge as a reminder of my progress and whether I needed to up the pace or not. After grabbing some explorer notes to get started, I found myself my very first tame, a level 5 dodo. There was no better tame to start this challenge with, so after knocking him out with my fists, we had tamed our first dino and only had the 91 more to go. I continued my note run, grabbing those final levels before respawning and trying to gather my starter gear. I made myself a pick, and then slaughtered an innocent dodo to get myself some hide, which I used to make myself a set of hide armor. I then set off up the southern mountain, where I like to start building a base early on, due to its easy access to metal nodes. Now, spoiler alert, due to me spending the entirety of this challenge chasing down the various creatures on this prehistoric island, I didn't really have a chance to build a proper base, so you're gonna have to just deal with these foundations that I put down. My first priority was to get some metal tools up and running, as well of course as some trank arrows. I decided to skip the regular bow stage of this challenge as I thought it would just be a waste of trank arrows, so I set up a refining forge and farmed myself up some metal so that I could make a crossbow. While I waited for it to smelt, I gathered some crystal to make an awesome Spyglass, which is one of the free mods that I use for this playthrough, with the others being Dino Storage and Structures Plus. Right by my base I found a Metapithecus on the hill, so I decided to start the taming process with him and feed him a Mejo berry. While I waited for him to get hungry again, I placed down a mortar and pestle before farming up some narco berries by hand, which I would of course use to make some narcotics. The monkey was now ready to eat again, and he soon became our second tame of this challenge. Only the 90 more to go now. Easy, right? With some ingots now ready to go, I made myself up a smithy and then proceeded to farm up some metal, and then stone arrows, something that I would find myself doing a lot over these 24 hours. With some trank arrows now made, along with a crossbow and some metal tools, I set off down the hill to see which creatures I could find to tame. On the beach I found myself a Dilo, who would become my third tame. While knocking out a trike, the Dilo tamed up, and I named him Owen after my editor, and if you want to see some top class art content, make sure to check out his channel in the description. On the hill I found myself a Moss Chops, who wanted some Tinto berries, meaning he was an easy tame, and the trike tamed up just a few seconds later. It felt good to be ticking off so many creatures so quickly, but of course I knew that the major challenges were still yet to come. Now, while I consider myself a master tamer in Ark, where no dino is left untouched, when it comes to the next-gen RPG called Watcher of Realms, I find myself having to join forces with my guild friends to challenge an exceptionally powerful epic dragon. Watcher of Realms is a next-generation fantasy RPG. Explore the mythical continent of Tyre, with its stunningly epic audio and visuals, as well as rich and strategic gameplay. Watcher of Realms is the new pinnacle of quality in RPG gameplay, and with over 100 heroes to unlock, forming a powerful team to resist an onslaught of countless monsters and demons makes for some truly enthralling gameplay. The diverse continent of Tyre includes a vast open desert, some chilling dungeons, colossal mountains, and so much more. Each stage poses fresh challenges, and as a commander, you must choose the best faction and hero combinations to survive. You have to play things tactically, making use of your hero's ultimate skills and healing spells with precision timing to defend your position, because every decision you make will directly affect the result. Watcher of Realms provides various mode, with my favourite battle being the Guild Dragon, where you can team up with guild partners to challenge the epic dragon as you top your guild's rankings. But if this isn't exhilarating enough for you, then the Tide will definitely provide you with an adrenaline rush. Beware of your heart rate, as you will face a relentless onslaught of countless monsters and bosses swarming towards you. When you are strong enough, climb the rankings and reach the top in some player versus player. Watcher of Realms is newly released, and two top influencers, the Game Theorist and JSlat Live, have been chosen to hold a team event. Choose the team that you support and have the opportunity to win rich rewards such as iPhones, Xboxes and Nintendo Switches. The event link for this is in the description below. So what are you waiting for? Download Watcher of Realms using the QR code on screen right now, or by using my special link in the description. Thanks to Watcher of Realms for sponsoring this video. With 35 minutes on the clock, I decided to start passive taming this Diplo. I would have to wait for him to be hungry again, but there was no issue as up on the hill, the Bowler God himself had his first outing when I bowled a raptor, the mascot of this channel, and knocked him out. Returning to the beach to check on the Diplo, I found a level 5 Sarco, so I thought it would be rude not to knock him out. Checking on the taming tracker, it was clear that we had made some good progress. By the way, all these dinos were named after my dear Twitch chat, so just another reason to come on over and join the streams. In the trees, I found myself a Dimorphodon, which I knocked out with one hit. I was midway burning this monkey to death, as you do, when I saw that Matty the Trike had died to a Dilo. he clearly was not worthy of being part of the army anyway. So I returned to burning the monkey to death, and then saw that the Sarco had tamed up, who was shortly followed by the Dimorphodon, along with Owen at the top of the screen, disgracing the Rampy Army by also dying to the Dilo. Diplo was of course now ready to be tamed, so I shoved a berry up his backside before boloing this Parasaur, who of course got a trank arrow to the face. The Parasaur became my 10th creature, and he was actually pretty useful, as I used him to farm up some narco berries to make some fresh narcotics with, as I had used up all my arrows. After a quick arrow restock, I retreated down the hill and found myself a turtle, who would become my 11th tame, and less than 1 hour on the clock and 11 tames in, I was pretty happy with the progress that we had made. The next tame would be a very useful one, as I bouldered this terror on the beach, ready to take to the skies. While I waited for him to tame, I gave this Lystro a berry and added him to the collection. The terror had now tamed, and I crafted a saddle for him. It was safe to say though that this Pteranodon wasn't the best in the world, and at only level 32, but it was better than not having any flight at all. At this point the challenge was going pretty great, good progress was being made. However, things began to change when I hit a sub goal on stream, which resulted me in spinning a wheel which told me what dino to tame next. Come on, don't be so horrendous. Not a Quetzal! No! Trooodon was certainly not the dino that I wanted to see. Reluctantly, I began taming up my already tamed dinos by the beach, as I would have to try and sacrifice these to the Trooodon to tame them. If you didn't know, the only way to tame these horrible little things is by sacrificing dinos to them. Baby gigas, wyverns, carcars generally work best for this, of course, as I didn't have any of these options at all, but I did have Fred the Moss Chops. Now, I figured that the Moss Chops would be an ideal starter sacrifice, as they don't tend to fight back. This was important as to tame a Trooodon, the tame itself has to actually be on neutral, which is why babies work so well, as they also don't fight back. Things seemed to be going well as I threw Fred in there, and while I passed out outside, I waited for Fred to be sacrificed. It's alright, all fine, all under control. Fred? Why is he just Fred! Stop fighting back! So it turns out that Moss Chops actually will fight back if they feel that fleeing is no longer an option. At this point, thankfully the Twitch chat did take mercy on me and did allow me to spin one more time to see what dino I would tame next. A Phyla wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but it was a whole lot better than the Trooodon. However, a problem occurred when the Phyla found me before I found it. It probably needs a wee, so... Oh! No! The Phyla found me first! After returning to my base, I then had to try and tame a new Pteranodon to get back to the Redwoods to gather my stuff. Yet, not even this would go smoothly at this point, as a Dilo attacked my terror and I was then knocked out by Trooodons. After finally getting our hands on another Pteranodon, we got ready to set off back towards the Redwoods. By the time I eventually made it back to the Redwoods and the Phyla, it had been over an hour since we had actually been able to increase the tame counter. Sadly, upon our arrival, we saw that our beloved starter terror was now a goner, and worse still, Monkey the Mesopithecus had also died at the hands of some allos. After tracking down the level 15 Phyla, I knocked it out and recovered my bag of stuff. The Phyla then finished up taming, and just as I was about to head home, I noticed a level 150 Argentavis. After some rather inspired shooting from myself with the crossbow, if I say so myself, I did manage to KO the 150, which sadly didn't have any amazing stats, aside from a good food one. With our 15th dino now tamed, and a key one at that, I continued our journey towards the north, in search of some more creatures. I found an otter swimming in this river near Black Sand Beach, so after killing a fish, I fed it to the otter for a nice and easy tame for number 16 at the 2.5 hour mark. Next on my list was an Ichthyornis, but after managing to kill a couple when trying to knock them out, I gave up on that for now, and instead settled on this Pegomastax, which might have been the easiest tame that I'd done so far. I then killed an Alpha Raptor, as I had long been in search of a better crossbow, and now I had the RG I could finally do this. Sure enough, the first Alpha Raptor actually dropped me 2 crossbows, and while they were nothing special, the Journeyman one represented a huge upgrade on the primitive one that I've been using thus far. I used this new crossbow to help me knocking out this Tech Stego. Good time to mention that I'm not counting tech variants as different dinos, as they are exactly the same dino with just reskins on them, and slightly higher levels of course. With the Stego tamed, I now had a superior Narcoberry gatherer, so I used him to gather some, which I of course made up into some narcotics. I then used these narcotics to tame this level 100 frog, which I knocked out and dropped into the taming pen to tame. A compy came up the hill to investigate what was going on, so I knocked him out also and fed him some prime meat as a special treat, so that I could tame him up. 3 hours on the clock and 20 creatures down, I then had some assistance from one of my Twitch viewers, as we'd hit a certain sub goal. If you want to make a cameo in any of my videos at any point, make sure to go over and follow me on Twitch. My good friend Matty and I took a journey across the island, taming various dinos we saw on our way, such as this Spino, which lasted all of 20 seconds, a feeling I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. We then found a direwolf in the snow biome, which was an easy tame to add to the collection. We then set our sights on something a bit bigger, a Utaranus. Now, Utis aren't the easiest tame in the world when you only have an Argy as your main mount, as they can of course fear you. At this point, Matty assured me that he had a master plan, which involved using our newly tamed direwolf, which we named Merlin of course, after my Siberian Husky. Exclusive Merlin pics on the Patreon by the way. Sadly, 30 seconds later, Merlin was dead, and I was rather regretting my decision to bring Matty on board. I certainly regretted the decision a short while later, when Matty, who was carrying my poor otter, got both himself and the otter killed. We decided to leave the UT for a while, and I tamed up some creatures nearby, such as a woolly rhino, saber-tooth and scorpion, while Matty looked for a Quetzal across the map. Next up was this Ankylo, which was tame number 27, and nearly 5 hours in, we were making some good progress. Returning to base, I tamed up a level 90 Phiomia, before grabbing a Patchy and leaving for Red Obelisk, where I met our next cameo appearance of this challenge. Meeting my good friend Emo Kid at the Obelisk, I brought forward a Patchy, which I got him to knock out and tame for our 29th tame of this challenge. With 5 hours on the clock, we had finally managed to locate ourselves a Quetzal. It was level 45, and together Emo and I tamed him up the good old-fashioned way, by chasing him down with an Argy with Emo in my claws. For once, the Quetzal didn't land in a pack of aggressive wild dinos, and I was pleased that we'd managed to get one of the tougher tames out of the way so early. From there, Emo and I just went on an absolute rampage in the Redwoods biome, taming every creature we saw. This included a Carcharodontosaurus, Megalosaurus, and a Terrorbird, to bring us up to 33 creatures tamed. We then tamed a replacement otter to replace the one that Matthew killed in the snow biome, and then a Palovia. Emo and I then knocked out a Microraptor, the most dreaded creature on the whole of Ark. This was then followed by a Megatherium, which we knocked out in the water, and then a Dodic along the beaches. The Megatherium soon tamed up, and perhaps became the shortest lasting dino in Ark history, as it seemed to drown pretty much on the very spot. The next target was a dire bear, so I decided to try and get some honey from this beehive to tame the bear with, and also potentially make some cakes with, back at base. Emo did manage to get some honey, but was then pestered by bees and sadly succumbed to death. Somehow I did survive though, and returned back to the bear and tamed up our 38th creature. With a lot of the easier tames out of the way now, but still with under 6 hours on the clock, the challenge was about to go up a notch. At base, after farming up some more narcotics, I first tamed an Iguanodon, and then ended up sacrificing him to the Ferrozino gods, as I used it to help me tame up this Ferrozino, one of the few creatures with my taming rates that I actually needed to feed narcotics to. Next, I set my eyes on the Baryonyx, which of course are very scary in the water, but if you stay on the land, they're not too much to worry about. The Baryonyx soon became our 41st tame, and it clearly inspired me to start getting into the water, as right afterwards I tamed everything in sight that I could see in the ocean, which included a Megalodon, Pelagornis, which for some reason floats on the water when you knock it out by the way, and a friendly Ichthyosaurus, who just swam up to me, begging to be my next tame. The next tame on my list was a Bronto, and I found this low level not far from base. This actually wasn't the only Bronto that I opted to tame, and you'll see why a bit later. My next tame after that then chose me, as I was grabbed in the swamp by a Caprasuchus. He clearly obviously wanted to be tamed, so I shot him with my crossbow until he was knocked out. He soon became tame 45, incidentally while I was actually in the midst of knocking out my next tame, which was a Dimetrodon, another tame that requires some narcotics, but after some babysitting it was added to the team. In the swamp I would find myself a level 20 Paracer, which of course was a very simple knockout tame. My next journey took me to the South 2 cave, where the artifact of the hunter is. Inside there I knocked out a Megalania, which was climbing on the walls, before taming up an Arthroplura in the water. Fun fact, if these critters are in the water, no bug repellent is needed to tame them, and you can just go up to them and feed them. While travelling to the northern regions of the map, I had a slight incident with a Filer, where he performed one of the greatest leaps known to mankind. Get this guy an NBA contract. 10 valuable minutes were wasted as I attempted to gather my stuff back, but eventually I did, and no real harm was done. While seeing what I could find around the swamp, I found a male Rhinogarthia, or however you pronounce it. As it was a male, I killed it to get the pheromone, in case I encountered a female anytime soon. I then brought an Equus back to base, only for me to mess up the taming process when I had to tab out to do something. I decided to leave the Equus for there for now, in the hopes that it would calm down, and I left base in search of a beaver. This wasn't too much of an issue to find, and I ended up taming one up at the hidden lake. At this point, I decided that I had to get some of these horrible tames out of the way, rather than just leaving them all to last. One of these, of course, was the Hesperornis. First, however, in order to make this taming process a lot easier, I opted to tame an Ichthyornis first. I knocked it out, and when I came back, I found that I'd been caged by another one of my dear Twitch subscribers. What a great community I have, hey? Thankfully, I did manage to get out of the cage, and cage the Hesperornis instead. I started to feed him fish before realising how long this was actually going to take, so I got my secret weapon out. The Ichthyornis will bring you fish that it has killed, and it gives them a golden glow type buff. These fish do substantially more taming effectiveness to the Hesperornis, and soon the silly little bird was tamed up. Oh, and also another cameo had joined me now, with my Twitch subscriber Lotrab joining the party for a brief time. Determined to make the most out of Lotrab's brief moment in the spotlight, we decided to head to Obsidian Mountain and tame a Giga that we had spotted earlier in the day. I had made some billboards to help me deal with the Giga and keep it stuck, but it turns out that this wasn't even needed, as the Giga managed to get himself stuck in between two rocks. Honestly, I was so sure that he was going to break free at any moment, but to my shock, he just stayed motionless the whole time, while Lotrab and I pelted him with some arrows. Possibly the easiest Giga tame of my life. And just like that, shortly after going down, we had knocked off 2 difficult tames within about an hour of each other. It was certainly noticeable, however, that the time between tames was certainly increasing now, as we approached some of the more difficult ones. While flying back to base, I finally encountered myself a female Rhinogartha, please don't crucify me for that pronunciation, which I had been waiting to find so that I could use my pheromone on it. Lotrab had also tamed me this Rex that I could use to sacrifice, as he had tamed it and I didn't count it towards a timer for now. The scene was set, and it was time to tame myself my first Rhino. No, you stupid thing! Oh! Safe to say that 9 hours of streaming by this point had pretty much broken me. I picked myself back up by using some rare flowers to aggro a Tapejara, before bowlering it and taming it up for my 54th tame. I then tamed an Equus in the wild, getting slightly lucky that it actually didn't run into any trouble for once. A trip to the snow was next as I tamed myself up a Karuku, followed by a Mammoth, which I knocked out and left to tame. Back at base, I made myself up a Fabricator, which I could use to make some scuba gear. So me and my horrendously leveled Sarco set off for the depths of the ocean, where I went on a crazy taming spree. Some of the most notable dinos to tick off this list were a Plesiosaur, a Basilosaurus, and a Manta. I ended up also taming new rhinos and mammoths, because I guess I felt bad I didn't stick around all the last ones tamed. On top of Obsidian Mountain, I tamed up a Kentrosaurus, followed by a Procoptodon, who I was able to knock out before he fled too far from me. Next up in the redwoods was the Archaeopteryx, and we had now broken the 66 tame mark, with almost half of the time still to go. Yet I never really truly felt like I was cruising, and I knew that with how long and painful some of these last tames were going to be, if anything, we were actually slightly behind schedule. I placed down some beer barrels on the beach so that we could get some beer brewing, and then had some great fun with my new net gun as I nested a Gallimimus, which had previously been too fast to catch. After taking my anger out on a Microraptor and showing him who was the boss, I took a rather scary journey to Carno Cave, where I netted a Megalosaurus. I was also in here looking for a dung beetle, and everything was going fine until I made a classic Rampy play. Quite frankly, I couldn't afford to keep making mistakes like this, as the clock was stopping for no man. I came back with my Rex to try and clear the cave once and for all, only for it to die at the hands of an Onyx. Quite embarrassing. Quite frankly, this cave was utter carnage from start to finish, and I knew that the timer ticking down in front of my eyes was playing a part in how sloppy I was playing, as I lost dino after dino, including my second precious otter, which was doing such a good job of keeping me alive. Eventually, I did manage to tame a dung beetle, and despite it not making it out of the cave alive, I had finally accomplished the initial mission, even if it did take over half an hour longer than I wanted it to. I had of course now back at base got mate boosted Brontos, as I knew I would need some baby Brontos to tame up the dreaded Chirodon, and more creatures. I bred the Brontos and took the fertilised egg, and I decided to feed the first one to an Oviraptor, who tamed up to become our 70th tame. Less than 10 hours left on the clock now, and the beer was finally ready, meaning it would be time to tame up a Chalicecapharium, the reason that I had to place these beer barrels in the first place of course. I went on a bit of a spree here, knocking off some of the easier tames left on the list, such as a Titanoboa, who I dropped a grateful Bronto egg to, and a Daedon. It was then finally time to take on the challenge of the Yuti, and I clearly have some amazing powers here, as I knocked him out with just my fist. After the Yuti, I killed a male Rhino once more, as my previous pheromone had spoiled, after I'd failed to find a female within the time limit. I then stopped by the redwoods, where I tamed up an Allosaurus, and then the swamp, where I got myself a Diplocaulus. With 16 hours on the clock, I decided to try the dreaded Chirodon again. It went about as successfully as the last time. I ended up giving up, opting to put it off once more until I had no other choice. Instead, I went back into the ocean, to try and finish off the final creatures we needed there, which of course were some of the big ones. The first one of these was the Mosasaur, which I knocked out and put some meat on. I then rushed back to mainland to get some honey, as I had spotted a Liopleurodon nearby, which are actually quite a rare spawn, and I couldn't let this opportunity go to waste. So with the honey secured, I raced down to the bottom of the ocean, where I tamed up the Liopleurodon, and then collected the Mosa, which had finished taming. I then had the Mosa assist me with killing the Eurypterids at the bottom of the ocean, to gather the 50 black pearls I would need to tame a Tuso. This went quite smoothly, and I managed to find a Tuso after quite a lot of searching, only for my Tuso bait, aka the Mosa, to die in seconds. Not a problem though, as Emo killed the Sarco, carried me to victory as I dismounted the Sarco while the Tuso grabbed him, and the Tuso was now mine. I then used the bear to destroy the same beehive that I had just stolen from in order to get the queen bee out. After a lot of failed sneak attempts, I finally managed to get up behind the queen and feed her a rare flower, adding a difficult addition to the tame counter. As I still didn't have access to bug repellent, I tried to tame a spider with Gilly. It took quite a few attempts to nail this, but eventually I did actually manage to do it and tamed her up. I did realise, however, that I couldn't rely on this method for the remaining passive tames, so once back at base, I decided to plant some crops ASAP. I would need these crops for some sweet vegetable cakes, which I would also use to tame a couple of the remaining creatures. I would also need some sap, so I made myself some sap taps and placed them on the redwood trees. A rather painful tame that I still had to get done was the Carcharodontosaurus. This of course is the process where you drag dead bodies to it and let them go when you see it sniffing, running as fast as you can in the opposite direction. In truth, I made this tame a lot harder than it should have been, as I didn't want to waste my precious metal trapping it. A mistake I won't make again, that's for sure. I kept getting close to taming this thing up, and then running out of corpses nearby and losing almost all my progress. Eventually I did smarten up, and I got a host of corpses ready in advance, including Ankylos and Kentros, which appeared pretty good for taming it with. After feeding her enough corpses, I killed the necessary creatures to finish the taming process, and my new tame rewarded me by flinging me down a hill to my certain death. I think we're going to be best mates. Back at base, it was now the next day, and the veggies were done, so I stopped by the redwood sap taps, killed another rhino for its pheromone, and then set about making some sweet vegetable cakes by the beach. With the cakes made, I swooped down into the swamp, where I grabbed myself an Achatina, and brought it back to base, where I fed him a cake in our lovely little wooden taming pen. It was now finally time to tame the rhino once more, after of course the last failed attempt. I decided to use the Carchar this time to impregnate it because, why not, it did fling me down a hill. After feeding it the pheromone and getting the rhino down to 5% of its max HP, it impregnated my Carchar, and a couple of minutes later it exploded, and out came a baby rhino. This is actually the first time that I've tamed one of these new creatures, and it was tame number 84 on the list. I quickly then tamed a Rex on Redwood Mountain, as I know you guys didn't officially see me tame the last one, so I thought I would get that done also. Next up, I tried to tame a Hyenodon. However, this Hyenodon had clearly been practicing magic tricks in its spare time, as it managed to produce one of the best vanishing acts I've ever seen from my wooden taming box. I did eventually track it down, and after trying to tame it again in the box, I came to the realisation that being stuck in a large wooden box seemed to be freaking the thing out slightly. Very understandable. With that in mind, I took it down to the beach for some belly rubs, which was eventually enough for me to gain its trust, so I finished taming him up. One of the tames I had needed to craft some bug repellent for was the Onyx. This of course is a passive tame, and despite getting a little bit angry at me when I tried to feed him, I eventually managed to tame it up, in the artifact of the massive lava cave. Straight across from that cave was Herbivore Island, a base spot that will always remain in my heart. Apparently the island feels the same way as me, and I could not believe my luck when I found a unicorn there. For those who don't know, only one unicorn spawns on the map at one time, and it can spawn in a number of places, including both Herbivore and Carnivore Island for some reason. I had been on the lookout for the first 20 hours of this challenge, but we did eventually find this with 3 hours left. It was no time to rest though, as I had another go at taming the Troodon. Honestly, this creature was just the bane of my 24-hour challenge experience. I tried to weaken my Rex to sacrifice it to, and then accidentally smacked it one too many times and killed it myself. I then tried to sacrifice my Rhino to it. Successfully did this, only to find out that it wasn't on neutral, so it didn't do anything for the Troodon's tame bar. It was now morning, so while I prepared Bronto babies for the next time, I set off to the snow biome to grab myself a Novice, who I fed a veggie cake to. On the way back, I tamed up a Gigantopithecus, which was by far the easiest tame that I had left to do. That night time, I had more Troodon nightmares. I did actually manage to get it to eat one of the Brontos, only for it to refuse to touch another one after that. After literally hours of trying, and aided by finding the lowest level Troodon I could possibly find on the island, I managed to finally tame one. As you can see by the name I chose for it, I was pretty much as shocked as you probably are. But the relief was short-measured. We were one creature short, and had 1 hour 30 to get it. Easy, right? Well, not when your last remaining creature is the Titanosaur. Taming a Titanosaur is a mammoth task for multiple people, yet alone doing it solo. And I had never ever done this before. As I flew my Quetzal over towards Obsidian Mountain, I had no idea whether this would be possible or not. So, to tame a Titanosaur, you must hit it in the head with some sort of missile. These days, most people would just use a mech. Sadly, we don't have that option on the island, so I was forced to go old school with a cannon and a Quetz. I had enough cannonballs, but hitting this thing was no easy task, especially when you were doing it solo. Even harder than actually hitting it was not getting stuck in it. If you as so much clip this thing, it would bug your Quetzal out, you'd have to dismount, and then get back on before you could actually fly again. As you can imagine, this wasn't exactly ideal when you had an angry Titanosaur after you. With our first hit under our belt, we slowly started to rack up the hits. The problem was this. Because of the time limit, I had to take risks that I wouldn't normally have done, which led to all sorts of pain, as the Titan destroyed cannon after cannon and whittled down the Quetzal's HP, which meant that I had to heal up the Quetzal in between hitting the Titan. As the time increased, I did manage to get the Titan to half torpor, but it was clear that time was running out and it was just going too fast for me. I threw the kitchen sink at it, but it just was not to be. There we go. Uh-oh, it's not looking good, guys. Ah! Quetzal! We literally got him to the cusp of half torpor. But that is it. With 15 minutes left on the clock, I think it's clear that the Titan will not be ours. Thank you all so much for watching this latest Ark Survival Evolved challenge video of mine. If you did enjoy the concept of this video, make sure to let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like on the video. Perhaps you could even let me know what map you would like to see me do next, if you want me to, of course. Raptors Evolved will now be the focus until the end of July, so I look forward to smashing out some great episodes for you guys there. Take care of yourselves all, and bye for now.
Drugs that you're taking are killing your soul. Baby, you gotta let go. The drugs that